Welcome to the Software Mention video series, where we explore the stories and ideas shaping impactful digital products in React Native and beyond. In each episode, we will dive into business strategy, technology choices, and the journey of building award-winning apps. This is Mateusz, and I'm a software engineer at Software Mention, collaborating with SeaPeople with my today's guest, Jean-Michel Lemieux, who is a co-founder of SeaPeople, a former vice president of engineering at Atlassian, and former CTO at Shopify. Hi, JML. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining the interview.
Good morning, Mateusz. Great to be here.
Cool. Let's get started. And for all the viewers and listeners that are listening to us currently, grab something to drink, get comfy, and listen to our amazing conversation. To kick things off, for people who might be discovering SeaPeople for the first time, how do you usually explain what it is?
Yeah, so SeaPeople is basically a combination of Strava, WhatsApp, and maybe Instagram or Facebook. It's basically a social platform for boaters. Mm-hmm. The whole purpose is to bring boaters and a community together because being on the boat, whether you're out in the middle of the ocean, you're coastal, or you're on a lake, there's one aspect is it's dangerous and you do need help and you need a great network of people. Two is sometimes it gets boring and you need to kind of reach out and find some folks. And the third thing is it's also a digital logbook. So as you take your trips and your voyages, in boating, it's actually important to keep a logbook so that your insurance company knows where you've been. You can, go back in time and look at where you traveled, et cetera. So it's kind of a combination of all those. But maybe the simplest way, it's like the Strava for boaters.
Yeah, this seems like a pretty interesting idea. And especially given that you had an incredible career at giants like Shopify or Atlassian, most people in your shoes might look for a quiet exit right now. But yet you chose to work on SeaPeople, which is like a startup. What was it about this idea that made you want to build it from scratch?
Yeah, I mean, it's true that, I'd been in tech I hate using the past tense, but I've been in, I am in tech for 30 years now. And I think, I had a plan that when my kids were going to be out of the house in university that, I could go relax somewhere. But it turns out that my brain has a hard time doing that. So, one of the things that I've been doing post, leading huge teams is I do love being on the water. For me, it's fun to, there's the engineering challenges of being on the boat and fixing things. And there's the emotional thing of being out on the water and sailing. So I had a trip planned for crossing the ocean. And so I'd been obviously practicing for a while and, I've been meeting all these people and I've been a Strava user since probably 2010, 2009, maybe. Probably the same year I joined Twitter, I joined Strava. And,
that's quite a long.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
And so I've been, I have my community of, runners and cyclists and it's great. And I didn't have that on a boat. So, I said, someone's got to build something, like the world is basically full of someone's pet projects. And I've always been a tinkerer, and I think I said, it doesn't exist yet. Let's go build it and met a great set of people. Maybe we can get to that later. Like, what do you need to build a company? I met some folks that I didn't want to do this alone. That I thought we could probably pull this off with. So that's kind of how I get. I guess I kept being an entrepreneur. It's kind of hard to shake that out of you.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's also interesting story, given that you are an active boater yourself. But given your perspective, are there any specific unmet needs you identified as a user of applications that became top priorities for SeaPeople for you to build?
I think there's a few things. Like the first one was a lot of the apps we have are pretty generic and they treat location as something that's really, really precious. Give how many people share their location in iMessage, for example, with their family, or Life 360 is another app. It's all protected. Whereas for boaters, we kind of inverse that relationship with when you're on a boat in the water, we always broadcast our location. So what would an app look like if broadcasting your location to others was actually permissive, was something like we're already doing all the time, which is what we do on boats. What kind of apps could you build, right? So for example, in our chat, when you chat with people, you pull down our chat map. You're like, I can see where people are. And, we can detect when you're on the water, when you're not. And we just do a lot around where people's locations are. So, like now you show up to an anchorage and I'm like, I want to see who's around me. It's almost like no one else could have built this because they didn't understand how boaters live their lives, and then I think if you don't understand that, you're going to build the apps that we have now that don't understand how boaters actually deal with location. So that was one. The second thing is I don't think we had to deal with what happens if you track for 43 days, like Strava. Like, could you ever track? Like, does anyone track a 42-day bike trip with Strava? Like probably not, right? And we have, like at SeaPeople, we have the world record of rowing across the Pacific in it. So there's 2 women who rowed from Panama to Australia, which I believe, you might remember, but it was like 87 days or something, over 8,000 nautical miles.
Like this. Yeah, it was, I believe, as some sort of world record, if I recall correctly.
It is the world record. And I'm like, so what app can you track for 87 days? Like, they're not built, they're probably crash, right? They're like, they haven't built that into their app. So I think we had to build this. I think no one kind of thought from the lens and understood what boaters were. So I think that's why, because obviously, like, the best situation for me was not to have to build another company. Like, it's not like I wanted to do this. It felt like we had to do this because, anyone else, like a non-boating tech company couldn't build this. So for me, that was like super interesting.
Yeah, that's a pretty incredible story and pretty specific answers to the whole question. So given that, and given how fast like SeaPeople evolves right now, how much different was the first version of SeaPeople comparing to like the current version of SeaPeople?
So the very, very first version of SeaPeople actually started before I joined. So what happened is there's my other co-founders had started and had kind of outsourced the development of this app, and they wanted to build. One of the first things I wanted to do was like to help people meet up, right? Have events, beach parties, regattas, etc. And the app was half done. And I think when I joined up, I said, listen, I've been doing this for a while. There's a couple of key things you need to do in a B2C app. The first one is you need single player mode. So for example, the first version of this app was like the only way to get something out of it was you start to have creating, events with people. And I said that bar, like that's a really high bar for an app to like the only way to see value is you have to join an event and do one. Like you can't join it and browse and get inspired. So, one of the first things I did was actually a non-technical thing for SeaPeople, was very, very product oriented, which I think is actually in the fun age of AI is kind of ironic, because I always say product is more important than engineering in some ways, because you've got to know what direction you want to take. And I think the first version of SeaPeople went in the wrong direction. So, and the reason why is you need single player mode, which is I have to be able to, like in any B2C app, you have to be able to open it and get something out of it without having, like 50 friends, or like you have to be able to get something out of it. And for us, it was like every boater is doing a trip. They have to be able to log their trip and share it and put it in their logbook. So that was, so that's where I guess maybe version 1.a, which is the one we actually had a beta with and that you see now, had logbooks, had the core things, right? So single player mode for us was tracking. Inspiration and community was that you can see where people are going. And then 3 is you can create meaningful connections. So that's how do people share their locations? Where do we show it on the map? How do we integrate location awareness into kind of all the components? In some ways, the app's changed, but also it's evolved. We haven't pivoted since the real 1.0 that we actually launched the app stores. And we have 100,000+ people on.
Yeah, and from what I recall, like all this happened quite quickly. And considering that we have a pretty small team, I would say, how you were able to basically accomplish such a velocity of changes with such a small team?
Okay, we have to realize that I came from, I was leading a team of 4,000 developers, and then I was leading a team of 2. And there's a bunch of things that really bug me about the velocity of, once the company gets big, there's a lot of administrivia, there's a lot of things happening. And you know me by now, like it really bugs me and it annoys me. So my purpose with SeaPeople, a bit of the things that got me really interested is, could we run, an app with 1 million users with 2 developers? Like what would it take to do that? Like, why not? And this is pre-AI bubble. Like this, we started this 2.5 years ago. And then, the first thing was picking the technologies. What's interesting, I looked at the README in our repo and I was like, nothing. Like, it's kind of survived the time, right? It's like, I was like, we got to keep this as simple as possible. I want to be able to run it on my laptop. I want it to, I want these technologies that we're using to kind of scale with us. Like, I don't want to hit a huge wall, and I kept it super simple. And then I think we went quick by knowing what we wanted to build, and we just, I don't know, like we had no overhead, right? And as Matthias is on the team, so I'm like super quick information sharing, right? Like every day, here's what I'm doing, here's what I'm not. So like in some way, like I call it like context engineering, but like pre-AI again, I was like in Slack, we're all like one brain, dump what we're doing. We do quick pivots. It's all about the code, no bullshit. And I expect when you're on my team, you're like, you've got to know why we're building these things. And I have a huge amount of expectations that people kind of understand things and go quickly. So again, remove all the cruft, be really clear on what the product roadmap is and what we're building. And 3 is like really tight feedback loops, right? So one of the other things that Matthias knows is, every developer has to be able to really easily test their changes locally in a real, like it has to feel like a real app. Like it can't be like I tested this, but I pushed it. Now I'm seeing what users are doing. So we've got a really good kind of like test harness locally, right? That we run, and we have real users. We can put 10,000 users. The app looks real locally, and that's something I think I built in the first week. Was that I wanted to just be easy to like launch, have real data. Like it's mock data, but it looks like our real user data all the time. And that, anyway, I think all that combined gives us the velocity. But in the grand scheme of things, it still took months to build. We didn't launch this in one day. It still took a couple. It probably took 9 months to build, and mostly because when we launched, I think we had 40,000 people in it in the first week. We couldn't kind of screw that up. This was not a lean startup. Let's launch it and iterate. It's like we kind of had to make a bet on a couple key things that were going to work. So that's how we ended up.
Yeah. From my also perspective, like this is one of the best work culture I've seen so far. And it definitely works based on this direct communication between people and just basically a trust. So I'm like really happy to see how much like velocity this itself gives us, because we are able to basically talk about the features and stuff. And we know that the person that we directed these words to will take this into account and will try to basically do the thing that we ask them to do. And this is like the great work culture and the great team that we are currently in.
Yeah, and I think it's not like I'm not a task person, because I feel like, if like someone builds the roadmap and have tasks they give to someone else, and the other person's job is to complete tasks, you don't get a great product. So like, and also, so like one thing I do not overplan. I don't go in 2 years, we're going to build this and let's build a roadmap for us. Like what's the most important thing we're going to do now? And let's make it really, really good. And then once we're done that, we're going to look at it, go, does it do what we think it does? What are we doing next? Right? Like I hate overplanning, because like things go too quickly and there's too many like it's a hard, like the world's like so complex. Like why would you plan like a year in advance? Like, so Matthias knows it's like, what are we doing? What are we doing next 2 months? Why is it important? Okay, let's go quickly, right? So I think we get velocity out of cutting unnecessary planning, and we plan with our eyes open with real data in real time, and we adjust and go. And I think that gives us a huge amount. I think organizations as a whole overplan way too much, and they overplan because they feel it gives them safety and security and confidence. And I think it gives them slowness and bad decisions.
Yeah, definitely. Flexibility is also one of the things that basically allow us to ship things so quickly and just focus on what's important right now. You mentioned briefly that you were going through like the README of our project, and you noticed that your like initial thoughts of the technology and stuff survived time, basically. And I wanted to ask you, why did you choose React Native for SeaPeople in the first place?
I was maybe a bit biased, but I was, I guess, one of the first companies who kind of embraced React Native at Shopify. So I used the alpha of React Native in 2015, I believe, 2014, 2015, when Facebook launched it. I actually built an internal tool at Shopify on the first version of it, because I felt I felt the potential of it. So in a previous job, I'd worked on this open source platform called Eclipse, where we had a standard widget toolkit, which we called SWT. So in Java in the old days, now I feel really old, but in Java land, when the first version of Java, it had a emulated UI library, which basically, drew 2D lines itself and had, basically had its own UI toolkit where it was not native, right? It wasn't the operating systems. So one of our first goals when we built out the Eclipse platform is we need a native UI widget toolkit, and it was called SWT, so standard widget toolkit. And it was basically exactly how React Native works today, which is we had bindings to OS level widgets, right? So our UIs looked native, but they were built in Java. So when I grew old and we're building for mobile, it just really pissed me off that we had to have like 2 mobile teams all the time, and like code reuse was hard. And so when React Native came out, like something in my brain goes, I've seen this thing before. And while I think in some ways the world was going, you're never going to solve this problem, I was like, we've solved this before. Like, this is not rocket science. Like, this is like, if you look at what React Native does, like your web browser does this every time. It takes HTML and it turns that button into a native button in your browser. Like, what the hell? Like, why? Anyway, everyone thought this was like black magic. It was React Native. I was like, we've done it before. Yeah, it's not like it's easy, but it's doable, And I think obviously the whole bridge situation, added a layer of, like, we did not have a bridge in SWT. Like, it was, it was Java. It was there was no message passing between the UI thread. Like, we own the whole thing, almost like the new architecture now. Like that's kind of like what's our architecture. So the bridge thing was annoying, but I'd been tracking it forever. And then we ended up at the time being, huge proponents. And then I think Shopify currently is probably, as a result of me being extremely bullish on React Native, like, one of the, I guess maybe the leading company outside of Facebook in terms of supporting it, supporting the open source. William Candillon, who's doing, a bunch of cool things, came in and worked with us on a bunch of things. So I think I'd kind of been pot committed on it. And then for me was also I'm impatient. So like, there's no way I'm learning another mobile. Like, I'm not learning Swift. Like I already knew React Native, and that was, I guess I went with this thing that I knew, and it turned out to be a good bet. And I think in 2016, 17, when I said Shopify is going to go in on React Native, one of the things that I really liked about it is the community looked great. The community around React Native was great. Software Mansion was there. A bunch of companies were doing it. It just felt like a great vibe, and I think that's what you want when you kind of make a bet on some technology, that there's some people who are betting their lives on making this kind of a great thing. And it looked like we had all the pieces. So that's kind of how I went. That's why we picked it. So very biased. I knew it. It was easy to start on day one.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I didn't know you actually worked on like a similar project in the past. So it is an incredible story from my side, given that you basically dealt with issues that React Native somehow dealt like a couple years later.
Yeah, it's funny.
But they just
when I looked at the new architecture code too, like, I mean, it's been out for ages, right? I'm like, oh yeah, you've got turbo modules and bindings, and yes, that's yes.
Yeah, that's interesting. Were there any other technologies that you took into considerations during the project startup?
I think that was obviously like your mobile stack's like, a key one, because you're day one, you're writing your mobile app. I think I hesitated for a while. We had no, I didn't want to have a lot of scaffolding around it. So it took a while for us to even have like an API server. Like, we literally had Supabase and React Native for a couple of months. Right. And I wasn't sure how I'd like that. I think we adopted Supabase again, super early days before they were like the celebrities they are today. But we built kind of like a data binding within the app, because I didn't know if that technology was going to survive. So, in our app, we've got, I guess, plain old, we call them plain old JavaScript objects, right? Of, like trips, et cetera. Like, there's no, like, all the mutations and the fetching is kind of hidden around the model layer. And for me, it was that, okay, we're going to bet on some technologies. I want to, you have to write your code so you can kill things that don't work after a while without having to rewrite your app. So we made a bet on Supabase as well at the time. I'm a relational guy. There's no way I'm going to use a document store. I hate, like, if you use the word Mongo, I'm going to run away in the other direction. So I'm a relational guy. Like the queries we're going to have to do, like there's no way I'm a relational guy. So Superbase is cool. Postgres, we can use their auth. It felt like we can go quickly. It felt like I knew we could scale with that because it's just Postgres. We know how to do that. So that was a bet on Superbase. And I mean, like all we have is we have a search. Like we use Typesense for search. So we can do semantic search. We can do embeddings. We can do like all of our more like searchy stuff in the app. And then we've got a web backend, right? With some endpoints that we either calling Superbase or we're calling the web backend for more complex operational things. And that's kind of all the app. It's fascinating, how with a small number of pieces you can get going. And ironically, the thing that I bumped my head on the most was just setting up auth. You need your Facebook, plugin, you need Google set up, you need Apple set up, you need to have all the magical things set up. Like of all the things I felt we went quickly with, I was amazed even how just getting auth working on multi-platform on the web and then mobile and with all the different auth providers and making you have the right keys in the right spot and like testing it, like that drove me nuts. Now we haven't touched it in 2 years. That's the good news. I don't think we've touched that code, but it took way too much time to get all that set up. I think we got trip tracking done quicker than we got all of our auth set up. So yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely an indicator of a pretty big pain point. Yeah. But given all the experience that you've got working on at SeaPeople and with React Native, what advice would you give to startups building like similar apps?
That's a good question. What advice? I'm a huge monorepo fan now. Like maybe it's not a React Native thing, but I'm like, if you're starting, like I think monorepos are the way to go. I think it's simplified our mobile dev. We can get, we can have all of our services running. We can test things. Like it's just that, like we did not start with a monorepo, and that was probably a mistake. We migrated to a monorepo almost 9 months into it. And it was a bit of a painful thing, but we used Turbo, migrated. That was a huge change. The other thing in React Native, we actually use an old, we use Restyle, which is like oldish, like UI templating language, which I think is great. Like that we have our theming and everything just there, and all just we can change our styles, and we've been able to have like work with our designer and have our UI components be very consistent and clear. Ironically, also we have no UI testing in SeaPeople, right? Like this, we've not adopted any UI testing, and I favored having very good. Like it's actually funny now. It's human testing, but it's at some point like now we're going to have agents testing SeaPeople soon. Like I've been looking into that, but having really good test harnesses and like the ability for people to just test and click around and feel real, I think is a really good feedback loop. So, React Native, like the one thing that annoyed me, it did take us a long time to upgrade to every like Expo version. Like that was probably the one surprise. I was like, wow, like it's not days, it's weeks, to go from Expo. I think we started on 45, 43, anyway, I forget, like, which, so we've gone through, all the upgrade cycles, and, React Native's been moving. So I'm looking forward to React Native moving a bit less, now that we're going to have 1.0. But I think the upgrade cycles caught us by surprise. And I'm a firm believer that you want to be on the latest because, you owe it to the community to test it, but also we're so small that going to the latest cost us, like it was work, right? One other mistake we made is we built for iOS first, which is kind of weird when you're React Native, but like we were wanting to go really quickly. And like I didn't have an Android device, I think, for the first 9 months of building it. So I'm like, let's just build the product. It works on iOS. I think that was a mistake, that you want to really be testing on both platforms right away, because there are differences, now there's differences that you can work around, but knowing what those are. And I think we used, a lot of native like phone, things, right? Like mostly around just locations that are different, right? Like maps are different across platforms. The location services are different and weird, and like the GPSs are not the same reliability level. So I think that was a mistake on our part, is do target both from day one, have them both in your CI/CD pipeline, have both as a developer builds. That cost us some time, and it took us a while to get Android up to par. But I think because we waited too long, and we just had to learn what those patterns were of things that, like the quirks between them.
Yeah, it feels like it's a mistake that actually it's very often made by companies, is that they focus on an easier version, which is like the iOS version. Android is usually much harder to deal with, especially in React Native, because often things don't work the way we wanted them to work due to like some system limitations and stuff. So yeah, definitely focusing from Android could be like one of the most important learnings taken from our story.
And React Native does have, unfortunately, it has to bring React with it, and React has its fatal bug of use effects, right? Everyone knows this. It's going to bite you in the butt. And I think when you have a really good device with good processing, you can get away with shitty use effects all over your, like with a less efficient app. And in some ways, Android keeps you honest. Like you're going to find like everything that makes Android slower or the rendering, like is all real issues in your app. They're just hidden by really good performance or better performance of more modern phones, and especially for iOS. So I think, everything we did subsequently fix made, iOS better, but it was probably more painful. In my mind, I was like, we can get Android done in a month, but honestly, to be like at par took a couple months easily.
Yeah, I fully agree on that. It feels like Android is just much more sensitive platform to work with. So basically, introducing any additional renders and stuff causes the performance to drop quite easily, which is pretty unfortunate. Do you think that our Android is like currently in a pretty good state given what we've done for like last couple of months?
Well, I mean, Matthias, you worked on this, so I'll ask about you. I think it's way better, and also I think React Native's caught up. In some ways, like the latest Expo upgrade made a big change. We're doing a lot of video stuff as well, so like there's a bunch of video things that have changed in some of the new Expo releases. We understood all the quirks of the maps, and I think just being able to like understand where your skeletons are with basically heavy UI components, right? Like re-rendering for no reason or for reasons you don't know. Like there's a lot of dependency chains in your component trees, etc. So I think I do worry that it's easy to regress right now. Like the tooling we have of like, we don't have a nightly build that says, by the way, your app got slower. So I do feel like the developer tools for mobile are still not as good as for the web. Like it's not as good in the sense it's harder. Like it's harder. Like we have to do more manual testing. We have to test across screen resolutions. And like it's a lot more work. So I mean, here's my advice. If you don't have to build for mobile, don't. If you do, then use React Native. But if you don't have to, don't.
That's a pretty honest advice, but yeah, it definitely feels like React Native does have some benefits, but also some drawbacks, and you have to know how to get around them to make everything work as good as possible.
Yeah, if you could build for web only, and you like that's good for your audience and for your community, do as much as you can, and if you can't, then because you're going to be into the rabbit hole of Android quirks and iOS but I think, obviously Expo's getting better. We had to learn a lot. I think React Native being stabler is going to be a big difference. I think the new architecture, the fact that we're getting rid of the bridge is going to make, Android better as well. So I think there's a lot of things in React that's going to make it a lot easier. We're almost 3 years into this, right? In terms of having to build this with a 3-year-old version Expo and React Native that was still moving underneath this. But I think for the restart, I think Android we would have gotten it as performant on parity quicker.
Yeah, it feels like one of the deal breaker for us in at least last couple months was actually the React compiler, which by just enabling it, we made our app much faster, much more, much quicker than it was before. So
you're right. Actually, here's a question for you. Why didn't you push me to adopt the compiler quicker? Remember I said, I think we need the compiler. I didn't, because it was still in beta, I think, right? It wasn't.
Yeah, this was like the main issue. I was hearing like some voices that it was pretty unstable at the time. So just basically trying to avoid some issues there. And I also wasn't like really sure about the impact. Like I know that we would be memoizing and basically re-rendering a lot less components everywhere. But yeah, I was also like pretty surprised by the impact it had on our application. Basically on every single feature, on every single screen, everywhere, people might just see it became faster using the compiler for us.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. We are currently collaborating with each other. So I wanted to ask you, what's important to you when collaborating with external product team?
Well, I mean, I think the reason why, I chose Software Imagine to kind of help me out was I wanted a hugely technical team. I wanted no bullshit, just great technical people who could help with the innards of Expo and React Native, because I knew that that's where we're, I could figure out the rest. But I think, tracking down and having access to the committers who are actually on, Expo Video or on Locate, like for me, that was the most valuable thing. And I think Software Imagine has been investing in the community for so long that I think it's just that raw talent. It reminded me of when I was back on the Eclipse open source project. Like we, collaborated with a lot of people, and we just had a really strong technical foundation and no bullshit. And I saw that in Software Imagine as well. So, and I knew that we were going to hit some quirks of React Native and of Expo, and I didn't want to bash my head. I wanted to just go to the source. So that's why I picked you guys.
Yeah, we definitely have a lot of connections within the community, especially that as a software mention, we joined the React Foundation lately.
Yep.
So I'm like really happy that we got recognized for the stuff that we were doing for the community of the React Native, especially the reanimated and the gesture handler.
Yep.
So it's nice to hear that it also was the deal breaker for you when you choose the partner to work with?
I mean, to be fair, we've been working together even in the Shopify days. So, I mean, so I think in early Shopify days, we wanted to support a company who was investing in the open source community. So we've been working with Software Imagine even through Shopify probably since 2018. So we kind of knew each other as well, which helped. I didn't know Mateus personally. Mateus came to the team, but I knew what the company was about and what their DNA was and what the culture was, and I liked it.
Yeah. So given that, what does a good collaboration look like for you from a product standpoint and also a communication perspective?
For me, it was like code talks, bullshit walks. I think I need great developers who understand and have good taste about what code should look like. And then the second part, which is the harder part in some ways, is I just really believe we're going to be so small. I need product engineers who aren't just going to take tasks, but are going to really want to get into like why we're building this, what it means. And then we can I want to give people missions, not tasks, which is, like Mateus, you know what it is. It's like, hey, we need milestones in the app because we want to shorten onboarding. We want to, we have a couple of outcomes, go build it. And I expect developers to go look at competitors, go look at how other people have done it, like become great product engineers. Now, ironically, maybe I was like, in some ways I was right, 10 years ago. It was like, that's what engineers have turned into with AI now, is we're all product managers, right? We're like, that's the hard part of knowing where to aim and what's important and what matters and how to review things versus just writing the code, I think is what is important. And, obviously there's, not everyone's made it on this team, the team has changed a bit because it's been hard to find, people who can do those two things is hard. So I think that's what I was looking for. And, like great expertise, right? I think, people on the team, like you specifically, like always staying up to date with what's going on, right? There's always some magic thing. Like the React compiler is a good example. Like, we might not adopt it right away, but I've got to know when I've got to be trying it out and knowing when it's almost ready, because imagine we could adopt it and it did what it did, right? Like we got a huge uplift. Like I need people who are curious, who are kind of like always looking at that next thing and understanding, is it going to be garbage? Because there's a lot of stuff that's new that's like, no, it's not time, but knowing when it's time. So that kind of sense of curiosity and always kind of staying on top of how the technology space is moving, and knowing what's bullshit versus what's actually valuable is key. So I think that's kind of how we ended up with our team now.
Yeah, definitely. Like, it's a bit unusual to have such a product-driven team, in also like engineers, because from what I worked in the past, people usually were focusing mostly on just technical stuff. But seeing how everyone is involved in like a product, everyone is giving ideas, everyone is shaping how the product will look like in like couple months, couple weeks, is definitely something that is unusual to me, but seems to be working very nicely in SeaPeople. And I think like this culture of focusing on this is great.
I think we get our speed out of that. I think it's harder to build because you don't get that on day one. I mean, Matthias, you've been with us for almost 2 years now. Is it 2 years or like a year and a half, 2 years?
1.5.
1.5.
More or less. Yeah. I've joined the summer.
But I don't think it's on day one that I said, hey, just go do this thing, right? Like we have to build up to that. Like there's an investment process in the people. So now, I mean, there's kind of 2.5 of us. There's Matthias, we have another developer, Jonathan, and I'm kind of like, in and out depending on my other random hobbies. But, I've got to I had to invest in you guys. We spent a huge amount of time together to figure out kind of the culture of our team and expectations, and also sharing why we're building this thing, like what the success looks like, why we're building it, connecting to our users directly. Like it took some investment. So I think if you're working with, if you're building a startup and you're like, you just want to outsource the development, I think it's fast quickly, but it's slow in the long term. I think I wanted to invest in like, a team who really cared in what we're trying to build and could make good decisions on it, right? And grow as like, and I think in the age of or AI, I think, software developers who know how to aim, and aiming means like they have a good product sense. They know what has to be built. Like in a world where anything could be built, what matters is what matters to be built, like what actually matters to be built. And I think that's kind of how we build a team. I think we get a huge amount of speed out of it. I think people like it. That's like, it's way better than just taking tasks off a linear board.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you think there are like any golden rules that would help other companies, other teams to build a work culture like this?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. Like, I think it's hard because I have the advantage because I've been doing it for 30 years, and I just had so many instincts and opinions on how I wanted the team to work. I think one thing that everyone can do though is not over plan. So like when you're building a startup, you kind of have this goal. It's like, I think we can take over the world if these things are true. And then you have to start somewhere, right? And I think a lot of startups fail because they try to plan every step of the way for world domination. And the reality is the world hasn't even given them, a chance to survive yet. So like trying to figure out you're really obsessed on like, okay, like in my 1.0 version, like what has to be successful there to get some traction? Like what do I have to know that's going to, like, what am I betting on that are going to work? And like get, and then figure out what that is. I say get there quickly, but at the right pace. Like I said, our example was super interesting because everyone's like, I want to release this week and iterate and get feedback. I'm like, we kind of made a bet on some things because we knew that we're going to launch with a lot of, like, our partners have a big YouTube channel. We're going to get this app in front of millions of people on day one. Like, so we knew that. So we kind of built to what we knew our launch was going to look like, what our first couple of features, if those don't work, the world's not going to give us permission to survive long enough. We're going to be dead, right? So like building to that, I see a lot of people are going to build to their end state and spend so much, they're going to do offsites and think about all the paths and like mock-ups. And I'm like, just like, what's the first thing that has to live that will give you the right and the permission to keep going? And I think that gave us some speed. We knew our environment. So you have to know, like, can you launch this in a week and you're going to get traction like Clawbot did versus like what, who's your audience? And I think is really important. I think it's harder for me because on the technical side, I was both writing the code and doing product, and like those lines were very blurred. But I think having a good roadmap, understanding your vision, and then I guess maybe being picky on the right technologies. Like I didn't want to have to rewrite this 20 times. I wanted to kind of have good technology that were going to grow with us. So I knew like TypeSense, we can do probably $1 billion, at least 25 million to 50 million before we had to start thinking about sharding and all that other stuff. And then Postgres is going to be fine for a while. Like knowing that, like it is a bit of a waste of time if every 6 months you've got to rejig things, So I think having an opinion on what tech stack you think can grow with you, so you can really focus on the product as much as you can. And that's kind of where we're in. That's why, maybe it took us a bit longer to launch, but we did spend time on some of those foundational things that gives us the speed we have now as well. So that's hard to like, what's the advice there? Just like bet on a couple of things that you think that could get you to 1 million users so you can spend time on your product.
Awesome. Yeah, that's definitely a pretty valuable advice from you, and definitely something that so many companies can just basically apply. Just be focused on what you want to do and try to do it well. What are your long-term goals for SeaPeople, both from a marketing perspective and a product development perspective?
The simplest was 1 million users who have their entire boat light in it with 2 developers. It's been that from day one. 1 million, like basically it is the Strava for boaters. So basically all the boaters on the planet have it. It's their digital travel planner log. It's where all their friends are. And we can do all that with 2 developers. That's my goal. And we're on the way.
Interesting.
We're at 15% there. So
yeah, we are trying. We have an app that works really nicely already, and we are basically growing the user base every single month.
Yeah.
So that's good. We are basically moving.
We're moving the needle.
We are moving into a good direction there.
Yeah, and I think obviously B2C is harder, right? Like if you're to build something, my advice: don't do B2C. Like B2C, like it's hard, right? And I have a huge respect for everyone who's built a B2C company and business. I think that I answered your question from the perspective of like what do we have to do from a product and technology where our vision is. I think the one thing we have to learn is go to market. Obviously, is challenging, and a lot of startups struggle with that. They think about it too late. Now we thought about it early. Like some of our partners are they have the biggest YouTube sailing channel, but what we realize is they have an audience, and if you look at the whole audience of our potential customers, it spans beyond just them. So just trying to figure out how to do more go to market and drive to different geos and get more boaters in Europe, for example, versus the US, and just like I think we have a lot of marketing work to be done, and I think. Again, it's some of the funny things you see on the internet now. Everyone's like, now that code is free because you can build a product with AI, what's the hard part? It's going to be go to market and finding customers. So I think we had a really good plan on day one, and that's why I joined up with this team. I have great co-founders who are great at marketing, and we've got a really great community. And everyone from the outside are like, it looks like you guys are killing it, and everyone's talking about you. It's like, yeah, yes, you've got to do this to get people to know about you. All of the trip sharing we're doing. But I think some of the work we have to do now is just, what does the world look like when everyone's saturated off social network? Like, how do people market now? Right. I think that's going to be changing, right? I think people are, is engagement on Instagram, like, is that how you market? So I think the getting customers now in the age of AI and everyone's saturated and, having super low signal to noise is going to be the challenge of every product and every app out there in terms of how do you keep awareness and people knowing about you, et cetera. So that's kind of where we're focusing on that. Network effects a bit, like the stupid term, but how do people get value out of you and kind of tell their friends and get, super easy onboarding and get that, see the value out of your app as quickly as they can. And you're kind of never done doing that.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting because you already mentioned a little bit of the current trends of the AI gaining customers and stuff. And this basically relates to my next question that I wanted to ask you is that looking ahead to 2026, what do you think matters most when building travel apps?
That's a good question. I think what we're seeing is now that you have the basis, I'm not, maybe it doesn't apply to all the travel apps, but for us is, trying to understand that like when you're traveling, there's other logistics that have to come to play, right? Like you need insurance. You have to you might want to do that with other people. You might want to have to rent a boat. Like there's other ways of doing it. So I think the first version of our travel app was like everyone almost who'd gone through the hard steps already to have boat ownership, get a boat in the water, etc. Now it's like, how do we help more people actually become boat owners and have a great and safe experience on the water? I think is where we want to go. And it's kind of like, there's a couple of companies in other verticals doing that, like Open Doors doing that with home ownership, right? Like when you sell a home, there's a lot of things you got to do. Like why is it so hard? Why do I have to have an agent? And I think boat ownership's very similar. Like insurance is hard. It's hard to get one. Do you know if you're getting screwed? How do I rent a boat and have a good experience? How do I get on someone else's boat and maybe help out? So just, I think that's kind of where we're going to be thinking about 2026 of kind of adding to the travel app, is making the logistics of boat ownership or being on a boat just a lot easier as well. So lowering that friction.
Yeah, that sounds great. And what if we recorded this conversation again in 2 years? What would you hope SeaPeople is known for by then?
Well, for me, it's going to be ubiquitous, right? We've got 1 million boaters on it, and people plan their trips on it. That's something we're doing as well. As I think, people like buying the guidebook and only having one guidebook to decide where they're going to travel versus us. We do have a community sourced almost 4 million miles of real trips, and that people plan their trips around boating in the app. They actually have their trips and they find their friends and crew in the app. That becomes ubiquitous is where I'd love to be in 2 years. And we're only really a year into it since we've launched and, had a real commercial app. So yeah, hopefully we're at that point in 2 years.
Yeah, that's great. Given our growth, it's definitely possible. Like we are introducing features very quickly. We are seeing that our user base grows pretty quickly. We are just basically evolving at such speed that basically everything seems possible there. Jean-Michel, thanks for joining me today. This was a really great and awesome conversation. And if our listeners liked it too, don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more. And see you all in the next episode.
Thanks for having me.